Elena Mercer stepped out of the airport with the confidence of someone who believed the world moved because she said so. She was the CEO of a fast-growing tech company known for creating powerful digital tools. Newspapers called her the woman who could turn anything into gold, and she liked the sound of that. She walked fast, spoke fast, and lived fast. When she traveled for business, every minute of her schedule was planned. Every detail was supposed to be perfect. That was why she frowned when she didn't see her usual chauffeur waiting with the company sign. Instead, she saw a tall black man standing next to a sleek black sedan. He held a small sign with her name written in neat letters. His posture was calm, almost too calm for someone waiting for a demanding CEO. He gave her a friendly smile as she approached. "Good afternoon, Miss Mercer. I'm Daniel. I'll be driving you during your stay," he said, in a warm, steady voice. Elena blinked. This wasn't the driver she knew. Her usual chauffeur was an older man with gray hair, a thick accent, and decades of experience in corporate travel. She trusted him. She expected him. She did not expect this man. He looked young, maybe in his early 30s. His suit was clean and well-fitted, but something about him felt out of place in her very structured world. "Where is my regular driver?" she asked. "He had a medical emergency this morning, so the agency assigned me," Daniel replied. Elena pressed her lips together. This trip was far too important for surprises. She was in Geneva to finalize the biggest deal of her company's history, a $1 billion partnership with several international investors. Everything needed to go smoothly. She did not have time for last-minute changes. Her assistant, Mia, leaned close and whispered, "I'm sure he'll be fine. He looks professional." But Elena shook her head and whispered back, "This agency must be short on experienced staff today." She didn't lower her voice as much as she thought, and Daniel heard her words clearly. Still, he didn't react. He simply opened the car door and gestured for her to enter. Inside the car, the seats were soft. The air smelled lightly of citrus, and gentle music played. It was exactly how she liked it, but she still felt uneasy. She glanced at the driver in the mirror. He sat with perfect posture and kept his eyes on the road. His movements were smooth, controlled. Yet, she studied him as if searching for something that would justify her discomfort. Mia tried to lighten the mood. "Tomorrow is the big day. Are you excited?" "Excited is not the word," Elena said. "This deal has more moving parts than a puzzle. If even one thing goes wrong, everything falls apart." Mia nodded. "Well, you've handled far worse." "True," Elena muttered, glancing again at Daniel. She didn't know why she was focused on him. Maybe it was simply the unexpected change. She needed everything predictable. Predictable kept her in control. Daniel drove smoothly through the clean, organized streets of Geneva. Sunlight reflected off the lakeside buildings, and the sky was a soft shade of blue. The city felt calm, too calm compared to the storm of thoughts spinning in Elena's mind. She had been preparing for this negotiation for months. The investors came from different countries across Asia, Europe, and Africa. Each had their own business customs, expectations, and communication styles. Her team had hired translators, cultural advisors, and legal experts. Even so, she knew how quickly misunderstandings could arise. A single wrong word could delay the deal or destroy it completely. Her phone buzzed with nonstop messages. Her board members asked for updates. Her legal team wanted confirmation of contract details. Her PR team asked for approval on press drafts. Everyone wanted something from her. "Send everything to my email," she said. "I'll look at it tonight." Mia hesitated. "That's a lot to review. You haven't rested since the flight." "I don't have time to rest," Elena replied. "This is too important." Daniel listened quietly. He didn't interrupt or add a comment. But inside, he felt a small tug of understanding. He had driven many business travelers before. He knew the pressure they carried, the weight of expectations, the fear of losing something they had worked hard to build. But he also knew that sometimes people hid that fear behind impatience or pride. At a red light, he glanced in the mirror and said politely, "If the schedule allows, I can take a scenic route tomorrow morning." It helps many clients relax before important meetings. Elena looked at him with mild surprise. She wasn't used to drivers offering suggestions. No. Thank you, she said quickly. Then she added, perhaps too sharply, just stick to the plan. Daniel nodded softly. Of course. Mia watched the exchange and then whispered, you didn't have to say it like that. I need everything precise, Elena replied. He'll understand. They reached the 5-star hotel where she was staying. Daniel stepped out to open her door. She took her bag and walked toward the entrance, still feeling uncertain. Before she disappeared inside, she turned and said, tomorrow morning, be here at 7. Not 7:01. Daniel smiled kindly. I'll be here at 6:50, Miss Mercer. His calm tone almost unsettled her more. She gave a small nod and walked inside. Later that evening in her suite, Elena sat at her desk surrounded by documents, laptops, and notes. The more she studied, the more anxious she became. She knew the deal was complex, but the cultural gap between the delegates was proving even wider than she expected. Some preferred strict formality. Others valued long discussions. Some wanted direct answers. Others believed that directness could be disrespectful. She needed to navigate all of this perfectly. That was her job. She had built her company from nothing. She could not allow it to fail now. Still, she couldn't stop thinking about the new driver. It wasn't that he had done anything wrong. He had been professional, polite, and quiet. But she felt uneasy because she didn't know him. She didn't like surprises, especially during such a critical time. Meanwhile, Daniel returned home to his modest apartment. He hung up his jacket, made tea, and sat by the window. He thought briefly about the way Elena had spoken earlier. It wasn't the first time he had sensed doubt from clients, and it probably wouldn't be the last. He didn't take it personally. People often made quick judgments based on appearance or assumptions. He had learned to let that pass. His life had taught him that patience often revealed more than words. He took a deep breath and prepared for the next day. He checked the car, cleaned it again, even though it was already spotless, and reviewed the routes to the conference center. He always did his job with excellence, no matter how people saw him. Morning came quickly. When Elena stepped outside the hotel, she saw Daniel standing beside the car, exactly at 6:50, just as he promised. He gave her a polite nod. Good morning, Miss Mercer. I hope you rested well. Morning, she replied, still distracted by her thoughts. She sank into the car seat, clutching her tablet filled with documents. Her heart beat faster as the hotel disappeared behind them and the conference center grew closer. This deal could change everything for her company. She didn't know it yet, but the quiet driver sitting in the front seat, the same man she doubted, the same man she barely acknowledged, would soon become the reason her entire mission didn't fall apart. And she would remember this day for the rest of her life. The morning sun spread a soft glow across Geneva as Elena stepped out of the car and walked toward the tall glass building where the negotiations would take place. Her heart beat faster than she wanted to admit. She had faced many challenges in her career, but something about this meeting made her uneasy. Maybe it was the diversity of the delegates. Maybe it was the pressure of $1 billion. Or maybe she simply knew that even the smallest misunderstanding could ruin months of preparation. Inside the building, everything looked polished and official. Tall, silver elevators, marble floors, and walls filled with modern art made the atmosphere feel serious. A receptionist guided her to a private conference lounge where her team was already waiting. You're right on time, said Liam, her head of international partnerships. He looked exhausted, as if he had spent the entire night preparing. I had no choice, Elena replied. Today has to go perfectly. Her assistant Mia checked her notes. All the delegates have arrived. They're in separate rooms right now, reviewing the agenda. Some are already raising questions about the translation terms. Elena sighed lightly. Of course they are. Of course they are. She knew each group had brought its own interpreter. Normally, this was not a problem, but today, with 6 countries involved, there were too many languages, too many accents, and too many expectations. She hoped the interpreters would manage. She needed everything to run smoothly, at least long enough to reach the final stage. "Let's go in," she said calmly, even though her nerves were tightening. The main conference room was large, bright, and elegant. A long oval table sat in the center, surrounded by neatly arranged leather chairs. Flags representing each country stood near the wall. The smell of fresh coffee and warm pastries floated through the air. But Elena didn't feel like eating anything. The first few minutes went well. Delegates entered the room with polite smiles. Hands were shaken. Greetings were exchanged. Everyone looked ready to work together. But then the problems began. As soon as the presentation started, the atmosphere shifted. One delegate from Germany raised an eyebrow and whispered something in his language to his interpreter. The interpreter said something different to the French delegate, who frowned at the change in tone. A representative from China leaned toward his assistant, asking for clarification. Meanwhile, the Italian delegate looked impatient, tapping his fingers on the table. Elena noticed it all. She felt the tension rising, even though everyone was still trying to remain polite. "Let's begin with the revenue projections," Elena said, trying to regain control. She clicked her remote, showing a clean chart on the screen. The German delegate asked a question in his native language. His interpreter translated it into English. But the translation sounded off too sharp, too direct. The French delegate responded, but his words were translated too softly, making him sound uncertain instead of confident. Misunderstanding after misunderstanding built slowly, like tiny cracks in a glass window. Liam whispered to her, "This is not good. The translations don't match the tone." "I know," she whispered back. "We need to stay calm." But staying calm became difficult. The discussion moved to contract terms. The Chinese delegate explained a cultural expectation about long-term commitments. His interpreter tried his best but hesitated several times. The hesitation made the statement sound unclear, almost confusing, and the German representative misinterpreted it as hesitation from the company itself. "We can't approve the contract if you're unsure about your own policies," he said firmly. Elena raised her hand. "He is simply explaining their cultural approach, not rejecting the terms." The French delegate added something in his language. His interpreter translated too literally, missing the cultural nuance. Suddenly, the Italian representative misunderstood the remark and thought the French delegate was criticizing the investment timeline. "I'm confused," Mia whispered. "Everyone is talking, but I'm not sure they're talking about the same thing." Neither was Elena. Each delegate had good intentions. No one wanted the deal to fall apart. But with so many languages in the room, and so many small errors in translation, the conversations were slowly turning into a maze of confusion. At one point, two delegates spoke at the same time. Their interpreters paused, trying to keep up, and the entire discussion became tangled. The atmosphere shifted again, subtle but noticeable. People leaned back in their chairs. Some crossed their arms. A few began whispering to their assistants with frustrated expressions. Elena felt her stomach tighten. If the meeting continued like this, they would lose everything they had worked on. "We need a break," she finally said. Everyone agreed. They needed air. They needed clarity. They needed the room to reset before things grew worse. Outside the conference room, Elena walked to a large window overlooking the city. She pressed her fingertips lightly against the cool glass. Geneva looked calm and peaceful. But inside her, everything felt like a storm. "What went wrong?" Mia asked softly. "Everything," Elena replied. "The translators are struggling. The delegates are impatient. There's too much room for confusion, but we planned so much." "Yes, but we're facing 6 languages. Even the best translators can miss tone or meaning." Elena took a deep breath. She tried to steady her thoughts, but her mind felt heavy. "I can't let this fail," she said quietly. "Not after all the work we've done." As she stood there, gathering her strength, she heard a familiar voice behind her. A soft, calm voice that did not match the chaos happening upstairs. "Is everything all right, Miss Mercer?" She turned and saw Daniel, her driver. He stood at a polite distance, holding a bottle of water. He looked relaxed, as if he had walked into a peaceful garden instead of a stressful business environment. "What are you doing up here?" Elena asked, surprised. "I saw some of the delegates stepping outside earlier," he said kindly. "I thought you might need water." Important meetings can be tiring. Normally, she would have brushed off the offer. But she felt too overwhelmed to pretend she wasn't grateful. She accepted the bottle. "Thank you," she said quietly. Daniel nodded, ready to step away. But before he could leave, Elena heard voices coming from the hallway. Two delegates were speaking quickly, one in Mandarin, the other in German. They sounded frustrated. And then something shocking happened. Daniel turned slightly toward them and spoke in Mandarin, his tone gentle and respectful. The Chinese delegate's expression softened. Daniel then switched to German, responding fluently to the other man. His words were calm, organized, and clear. Both delegates relaxed almost immediately. Elena's breath caught in her throat. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. The man she had judged without a second thought was speaking two foreign languages as naturally as breathing. The delegates nodded, thanked him, and walked away with eased expressions. Daniel turned back to Elena. He was polite, as always, not proud, not boastful, just kind. "I hope your meeting improves, ma'am," he said simply. Elena could only stare at him. Mia whispered, "Did he just speak two different languages?" Elena didn't answer. Her mind raced with questions. Who was this man? How many languages did he speak? And why on earth was he driving a car instead of sitting inside the meeting room? She didn't know it yet, but the moment she witnessed in the hallway was only the beginning. Soon, the meeting that seemed doomed, the deal that appeared broken, and the tensions that were rising out of control would all change because of the man she underestimated the most. Elena returned to the conference room feeling unsettled, but also strangely hopeful. She kept replaying the scene she had witnessed in the hallway, Daniel speaking Mandarin and German so fluently, so naturally, that both delegates had relaxed instantly. She had only known him as her driver, a quiet man who opened doors and carried luggage. She had never once imagined that he might have skills far beyond that role. As she entered the room again, the delegates were already seated. They were sipping tea or checking their documents, but the tension had not disappeared. The interpreters looked nervous, flipping through their notes as if trying to catch up. Elena sat in her chair, placed her notebook in front of her, and tried to calm the noise in her mind. She needed a solution, something that could bridge the communication gap and straighten the confusion. But she had no idea what that solution was. Her assistant Mia leaned closer and whispered, "I still can't believe your driver just spoke two languages like that." "I can't either," Elena whispered back. "But right now, we need to focus." The meeting restarted. At first, things seemed slightly better. Delegates spoke slowly. Interpreters tried harder. And everyone attempted to give clearer explanations. But eventually, the same issues returned. A French representative made a point about shared responsibilities. His interpreter translated it into English. But the translation made him sound uncertain, causing the German delegate to question his commitment. Meanwhile, the Chinese delegate spoke with enthusiasm about long-term cooperation. But the English translation came out flat, almost emotionless, as if he didn't care much about the deal at all. Elena watched it all unfold, feeling helpless. During a break, she stepped outside again and walked down the quiet hallway. She rubbed her temples, trying to think of a way to rescue the negotiation. The deal was slipping away from her fingers like sand. As she turned a corner, she stopped. Once again, she heard Daniel's voice. He stood with two more delegates, one from Italy and another from an African country. They were having trouble understanding each other, and their interpreters were struggling. While the Italian delegate gestured with passion, the African delegate listened politely but with confusion. Daniel stepped forward gently, speaking Italian with warm, smooth cadence. The Italian delegate's face lit up in surprise. Then Daniel switched into Swahili, speaking clearly to the other delegate. Both men relaxed, smiling at each other for the first time since the morning. Elena froze. It wasn't just two languages this time. It was more. He knew Italian. He knew Swahili. And he spoke them both with confidence, as though he had lived in both cultures. She watched in disbelief. When the delegates left the hallway, Daniel noticed her standing nearby. For a moment, their eyes met, and Elena felt something shift deep inside her. She had judged him in seconds, based on nothing but his job title and appearance. Yet here he was, solving international misunderstandings with kindness and calmness skills her entire team of trained specialists could not manage. "You speak many languages?" she finally said, in a quiet voice. Daniel smiled the same gentle smile he had shown since the first day. "Yes, ma'am. I grew up surrounded by many cultures. Languages came naturally to me." "How many?" she asked, almost afraid of the answer. "9, he replied modestly. "Some I learned at home, others during my studies." "9? Mia repeated, stunned. "You speak 9 languages?" Daniel nodded politely. "Yes." Elena blinked several times. This was beyond anything she had expected. She felt a mixture of surprise, embarrassment, and something else, something like admiration. She cleared her throat. "Have you ever worked in corporate settings or with international teams?" Daniel hesitated. Not because he was hiding something, but because he was choosing his words carefully. "I used to work in international communication and cultural mediation," he said softly. "But life changed. I needed flexible work hours, so I started driving." Elena felt her breath catch. She suddenly felt foolish for how she had judged him on the first day without knowing anything about him, without even giving him a chance. Before she could respond, the door behind her opened, and Liam stepped out. He looked frustrated and worried. "Elena, the delegates are getting impatient. They're saying the translations are creating too much confusion, and they want to postpone the deal until we find a better solution." Postpone? In business language, postpone often meant cancel. Once momentum was lost, many deals never came back. Elena knew she had only one chance left. She looked at Liam, then turned back to Daniel. She took a long breath and asked softly, "Daniel, would you be willing to step into the conference room? Just for a moment?" Mia's eyes widened, and Daniel looked surprised, but he remained calm. "You want me to help with the meeting?" he asked gently. "Yes," Elena said. "You've already helped outside. Maybe you can help inside too. The misunderstandings are destroying this negotiation." Daniel thought for a moment. He respected boundaries. He had never stepped beyond his role without permission, but he also saw how stressed she looked and how disappointed the delegates were becoming. "If you believe it would help, then I'm willing," he said. Relief washed over Elena's face. "Thank you," she whispered. Inside the conference room, the delegates stared with curiosity as Daniel entered. Some recognized him from the hallway. Others seemed surprised to see a driver walking into such an important space. Elena stood up. Her voice remained calm, but her heart beat fast. "Everyone, this is Daniel. He has been assisting outside with communication. With your permission, I would like him to help clarify certain points during our discussions." The delegates exchanged looks. The Italian representative nodded first. "If he is the same man who helped us earlier, then I have no objection." The Chinese delegate agreed. "He explained our concerns very well." One by one, the representatives gave small nods of approval. Daniel stepped forward politely. "I'm here only to help communicate more clearly. Please let me know if anything needs clarification." The mood in the room shifted immediately. The French delegate began speaking in his language about contract expectations. Daniel listened carefully, then translated his words into English, but not just the words. He captured the tone, the intention, the soft respect behind the message. The German delegate responded firmly in his language. Again, Daniel translated, not making him sound aggressive, not softening him too much but balancing his tone so the meaning remained clear and fair. Then the Chinese delegate spoke. Daniel switched to Mandarin smoothly, translating back into English with accuracy and respect. For the first time that day, everyone understood each other. Even the interpreters looked relieved, as if they had been carrying heavy backpacks that someone had suddenly helped lift. Elena watched in quiet awe. Daniel stood tall, confident, but humble. He did not show off. He did not take over the meeting. He simply connected people. He listened carefully, spoke gently, and made sure every message was delivered exactly how it was meant to be. The room, once filled with confusion and frustration, now felt balanced, almost peaceful. Elena felt grateful, deeply grateful. But she also felt something else. Shame. She remembered how she had whispered about him on the first day. Assuming he wasn't experienced enough, just because of his role, she had been wrong, very wrong. As the meeting continued with new clarity, she realized something important. Sometimes, the greatest help comes from the person you least expect. And Daniel, a man she had barely noticed that morning, was becoming the bridge that held her billion-dollar deal together. The moment Daniel began helping inside the conference room, everything slowly started to change. The tense atmosphere that had been weighing down the entire discussion began to lift, almost like fog fading away from a city in the morning sunlight. Delegates who had spent hours confused and frustrated now looked more relaxed. Some even looked impressed. But the real turning point came when the conversation shifted to the most sensitive topic of the negotiation: the cultural expectations around long-term partnerships. This was the part of the deal that had worried Elena the most. Not because the terms were unfair, but because every country had its own way of expressing trust, commitment, and business values. If these messages were misunderstood, the entire deal could collapse in minutes. The Chinese delegate began to speak first. He explained how his company valued loyalty and long-term stability. But when his interpreter translated it, the English version sounded too formal and distant. The warmth and sincerity behind his words were lost. Daniel opened his mouth gently and spoke in Mandarin. Every person in the room looked at him again, surprised but grateful. He listened to the delegate's original words carefully, then translated them into English with a tone filled with the same respect the delegate had expressed. Immediately, several representatives nodded. The French delegate even smiled a little, as if he finally understood the meaning behind the message. Next, the German representative talked about the importance of transparency and clear expectations. His interpreter translated properly, but the tone came out sharper than intended. It almost sounded like he was demanding guarantees instead of discussing partnership. Daniel stepped in gently again, speaking German with perfect clarity. When he translated it into English, he softened the tone just enough to reflect the businesslike but respectful nature of the delegate's original intentions. For the first time, the Chinese and German representatives smiled at each other, even though they came from cultures that communicated very differently. Elena watched in awe. She had seen translators work before, but Daniel was doing something different. He didn't just translate words, he translated emotions, cultural meanings, and the energy behind each message. He turned confusion into clarity and suspicion into understanding. Soon, the Italian delegate spoke about timelines. His interpreter tried his best, but missed a few small phrases that were important. Daniel smoothly switched to Italian, translated the full message, and captured the enthusiasm and urgency behind the words. Then the African delegate explained his country's vision for technology growth. His interpreter translated it correctly but without passion, making the message feel flat. Daniel switched into Swahili and then translated into English with warmth and excitement, matching the delegate's proud tone perfectly. The room seemed brighter, as if the conversation itself had found rhythm and harmony. Elena felt herself relax for the first time that day. Her shoulders loosened. Her heart stopped racing. She looked at Daniel with growing respect and gratitude. She had seen people with special skills before: engineers, analysts, negotiators, but she had never seen anyone who could connect so many people so naturally. Still, the biggest challenge was yet to come: the contract revisions. This part of the meeting usually involved complicated legal terms and delicate discussions. Every word mattered. A single misunderstanding here could cause disagreements so big that the deal would fall apart entirely. Liam cleared his throat. "We need to finalize the structure of the long-term agreement." The French delegate proposed a term. The German delegate objected. The Italian delegate suggested a middle ground. The Chinese delegate needed clarification. All four interpreters spoke quickly, but even small mistakes began to appear again. Daniel breathed gently, waited for a pause, and then stepped forward with polite confidence. May I summarize what everyone is trying to say? He asked softly. The delegates nodded eagerly. Daniel then began speaking. He first explained the French proposal in English accurately, clearly, and with the same respectful tone the delegate had used. Then he summarized the German representative's concerns, making them sound balanced instead of critical. Next, he added the Italian suggestion, adjusting his voice to match the delegate's warm personality. Finally, he explained the Chinese delegate's request for clarification, with patience and calmness. It was the first time in hours that every person in the room understood the full picture. Even the interpreters looked relieved. They smiled at Daniel with appreciation, grateful for the help instead of feeling replaced. They understood how hard their job was, and no one could deny Daniel's extraordinary talent. After hearing the full summary, the delegates talked calmly among themselves. They exchanged ideas without raising their voices, without confusion, and without frustration. One of the French representatives turned to Elena and said, "Your team is very well prepared. And your colleague here is remarkable." Elena smiled. "Yes, he truly is." She glanced at Daniel. He simply gave a small nod, staying humble despite the praise. The meeting continued for several more hours. Daniel moved between languages as smoothly as a musician, switching between instruments, never rushing, never showing off, and always respecting each delegate's culture and tone. He spoke Mandarin, German, Arabic, Italian, French, Swahili, Spanish, Russian, and, of course, English. Every time he switched languages, the delegates exchanged surprised glances, amazed by his ability. Elena watched their reactions carefully. She could see how each representative now saw Daniel not as a driver, not even as an interpreter, but as a bridge connecting them. It was magical in its own quiet way. By late afternoon, something incredible happened. The delegates began agreeing on every major point. They even started laughing at small jokes, nodding in appreciation, and complimenting each other's ideas. The pressure in the room had completely dissolved, replaced by understanding and even a sense of unity. Elena felt her throat tighten with emotion. She had spent months preparing for this negotiation. She had planned every detail, studied every document, and hired top experts. But in the end, the person who saved the entire deal was the man she had almost dismissed on the first day simply because he was just the driver. When the last page of the deal was reviewed, the German representative leaned back and said, "I believe we are ready to sign tomorrow." The Chinese delegate nodded. "Yes. The misunderstandings are solved. Everything is clear now." The French delegate added with a warm smile, "Today went very well." The Italian representative gave a small clap. "Yes. Very good work from everyone." Elena looked at Daniel, who simply stood in the corner, calm and quiet, as if he hadn't just saved $1 billion negotiation. But then, something unexpected happened. One of the delegates turned to Daniel and said, "Young man, you should not be driving cars. You have the skill to work with governments, corporations, and international teams." The others nodded in agreement. Daniel only lowered his head slightly, smiling with humility. "I'm happy to help in any way I can." Elena felt her heart shift again. She realized that many people in the world had hidden stories, hidden talents, and hidden reasons for the jobs they had. She had always believed she understood people well, but Daniel proved that she had much more to learn. As the delegates began packing their documents, Elena walked over to Daniel and said in a soft voice, "You saved this deal." Daniel shook his head respectfully. "Everyone worked together. I only helped with communication." "You did much more than that," she whispered. For the rest of the evening, Elena couldn't stop thinking about everything she had seen. Daniel's calmness, his kindness, his remarkable intelligence, his ability to connect people who came from completely different places. She had walked into the meeting scared of failure, but she was walking out with new hope and new understanding. She knew tomorrow would be the final day, the day the contracts would be signed, and Daniel had become the silent strength behind the success she never imagined. The next morning arrived with a soft glow of sunlight spreading across Geneva. The sky was clear, the weather calm, and everything seemed ready for the final signing of the contract. Elena woke up with a strange mix of excitement and nervousness. Even after yesterday's success, she knew that nothing was final until every signature was on the last page. She dressed carefully, choosing a neat business suit, and checked her notes one more time. But this time, she wasn't anxious the way she had been the day before. Something inside her felt lighter because she knew she had someone on her side now. Someone who had turned the entire negotiation around by simply helping people understand one another. Daniel, the man she had judged too quickly, the man she had underestimated, the man who spoke 9 languages with ease and respect. As she stepped out of the hotel lobby, she saw him standing beside the car, just as calm and professional as always. He greeted her with a gentle nod. "Good morning, Miss Mercer." "I did," she said with a smile. "And thank you again for everything yesterday." Daniel smiled politely but did not say much. He wasn't someone who needed attention or praise. He simply did what he knew was right. The ride to the conference center felt different. Elena wasn't reviewing notes or worrying about misunderstandings. Instead, she found herself thinking about how life could surprise people, how someone's story could be much bigger than their job title, and how she, despite all her success, still had so much to learn about humility and respect. When they arrived, the conference building felt welcoming instead of intimidating. Inside, the delegates were already gathering, talking amongst themselves in warm tones rather than tense whispers. The atmosphere was calm, almost friendly. As soon as Elena stepped inside, the German representative greeted her with a smile. "Today will be a good day," he said confidently. The Italian delegate nodded. "Yes, we have made great progress." Even the Chinese representative, who was usually reserved, gave a respectful nod. "Everything is clear now. Thank you for yesterday." Elena smiled politely, but she glanced subtly toward Daniel, who stood a little behind her. She knew they were thanking him as much as her, maybe even more. The signing ceremony began shortly after everyone settled in. A large wooden table was placed in the center of the room, with neatly arranged pens, fresh copies of the contracts, and a small flag of each represented country. Photographers and assistants stood around the edges, ready to capture the moment. Before the formal signing, each delegate gave a brief speech. They spoke about the vision of the partnership, the importance of unity, and the promise of working together for a better future. The speeches were sincere and hopeful, but what struck Elena the most was something small but meaningful. Every delegate made sure their words were simple, clear, and respectful. They were all speaking with the memory of yesterday's confusion still fresh, but this time, there was no miscommunication. It was as though Daniel's presence had taught everyone a gentle lesson about understanding. When it was time for the official signing, the room grew quiet. Each delegate stepped forward one by one, picked up a pen, and signed their name. Each signature felt like a victory. Each stroke of the pen carried months of work, countless discussions, and 1,000 small moments of effort. When Elena finally signed her name, she felt a warm wave of accomplishment wash over her. She had dreamed of this partnership for years. Now, because of one unexpected person, that dream had become real. As the final delegate signed the contract, applause filled the room. Cameras clicked, assistants smiled, and everyone stood in celebration. It was a moment of relief, joy, and pride. But even in the middle of all that excitement, Elena looked toward the corner of the room where Daniel stood quietly, giving a small smile, proud, but humble. After the ceremony ended, the delegates gathered around Daniel to thank him personally. One shook his hand. Another placed a hand on his shoulder in appreciation. Yet another told him that he had a rare gift. "You have a natural talent for building bridges between people," the French delegate said kindly. "You should work with international teams, not only drive cars," the Italian representative added with a smile. Daniel nodded modestly, not bragging or seeking attention. "Thank you. I'm happy I could help." Elena stood beside him now, feeling a new level of respect for the man she had barely noticed when she first met him. Once the crowd began to clear, she turned to Daniel. "I want to know something." she said softly. Why did you never tell the agency about your language skills? They would have placed you in a much higher role. Daniel looked thoughtful for a moment. Sometimes what we need in life is not a high position but a peaceful path, he said gently. My family needed me. Driving allowed me to take care of things at home while still working. Life made me choose a different direction. His voice carried no bitterness, only acceptance. Elena felt something tug in her heart. She had spent her entire career chasing success and power. But Daniel had chosen something different. He had chosen peace. And yet, even with a quiet job, he held more talent than many people in top positions. She realized that success looked different for everyone. After the delegates left, Elena approached him with a serious expression. Daniel, she said, I want to offer you something. He looked at her calmly, waiting. You have skills that could help thousands of people, not just a few. I want you to join my company not as a driver, but as a cultural communication advisor. Daniel blinked, surprised. That is very kind, Miss Mercer. But, Elena, she corrected gently. Please, call me Elena. He gave a small smile. Elena, it's a generous offer, but I need time to think about it. My responsibilities at home are still important. Take all the time you need, she said sincerely. The offer will stay open. As they walked together toward the exit, Elena felt a peaceful silence between them. Not tense, not awkward. Simply comfortable, like two people who understood each other without needing many words. Outside, the sun shone bright, and the air felt fresh. Before parting ways, Elena stopped and looked at Daniel with gratitude. You changed everything, she said softly. Not just the deal. You changed me too. Daniel gave the same gentle smile he always had. Sometimes, he replied, we learn the biggest lessons from the smallest moments. Elena nodded. She would remember that for the rest of her life. As she watched him walk away to the car, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She would never again judge someone by their job, their appearance, or the assumptions she used to make so quickly. Because the man she had underestimated, the man she had barely acknowledged at first, had saved her billion-dollar deal. And in doing so, he had opened her eyes to something far more valuable. He had taught her the power of humility, the power of kindness, and the power of truly seeing people not for what they appear to be, but for who they really are inside.